What's up, guys? It's Non-Tuxic, your favorite non-toxic Linux YouTuber, and I'm back again for another video.
There are over 1,000 distributions.
I was 21 years old and I had basically programming half my life.
So, very recently in my life, I took part in what's called a hackathon. So I attended a university. I'm a university student. And I attended a hackathon, and essentially I went into it thinking that I was gonna do some hacking, some break into a system, SQL injection kind of stuff. I thought we were gonna do some capture the flag stuff. There was a bit of that in a session another guy had, where he came to the hackathon. A few different sponsors came in, but that wasn't what the main hackathon was about. And so for us who were competing, we were essentially in a group of people. We form a little group, make some software together, and present it on the last day, which I did not know you had to actually make a presentation like that. It was my first hackathon. I wasn't expecting it to be quite like that. So here in this photo, I've just got a few more pictures of some of what's happened in the hackathon. So we're just in this building, we're all on our different tables. So here's just one guy in my group. I've just got some pictures. I'm just gonna quickly flick through, so as you can see, we're just working on our coding. We're just making sure that everything is done well. You can see there's also a Red Bull on the table because we haven't been able to get as much sleep. So going back to what actually took place on the day, you'd input a stock name and how much of that stock you have. You could have 2.5, 0.01 portions of that stock, and it essentially is going to tell you how much money you would lose, you're risking losing within a particular time frame. You just input the stock name, the stock number, and you can input as many different ones as you want, and then it will just tell you. So I use this application, I use this package in Python called tkinter, which one of the sponsors from Hackathons UK recommended to me. A bit like if you've used Java, so you've created your JFrame in Java, a little window, and you just have your things going on there. One of the things that's coming to your mind, Curtis, why are you using Linux? I see your Windows bar there at the bottom. What's going on? Well, the answer to that is originally I was using Linux. Originally we were gonna use C#. So me and another guy, we were gonna work on the front end using C#. And he mentioned that since Java and C# have some similarities, it would be easy for me to pick up on the syntax. But I thought, unfortunately, he couldn't be here for some reasons. In the competition, there were two particular technical skills that I used in Bash to help me code my work. So the one that I tried but realized I wasn't able to work with is one called drawing, which I'll show you first. So if we've got some information in our text files, so if I just output these text files, so as you can see, we've got some names of some first names and surnames, and then we've got the number of the line that it's on with it. So the first one, hello, is John, Jane, Mary, and the second one, world, is Smith, Brown, and Johnson. And then if I output this information as well, and you can see here it's the same text but without the line numbers. Now the issue that I made is that I didn't know that you had to put those line numbers in. So when I did it, I just put that I had a list of a bunch of stocks. So I've just got a little reference file. So this is just some little stocks I just made up. But I just had something like this, but just a list of like loads and loads of them. I think there were about 8,000 of them, and I thought I could use this join function. I'm going to do that to help save me time. So what I had to do is join on the quote marks so that when the person on my team was going to work with it, he could use that for his side, the front end side of what we were working on. However, working on this was tricky with the join function. I realized I couldn't do it without the line numbers. But if I just show you now, so with hello.txt and world.txt with the line numbers, if I do join here, then it just outputs all of that right onto your terminal for you to see. You can even output that to another file as well, which was what I was going to aim to do. So I've got a file here, new file.txt, and then if I output also new file.txt, and you can see exactly again, it's got all of that information there, very clear, but you have to have the line number on it, otherwise it won't work, which is something that I just didn't get. The second command that I used in my coding in terminal was unzip. So this is one where I was struggling for a little while because I made some assumptions about what command would work. There's 7-zip, there's tar, there's different file extensions of compressed files. But the one that I was using was just a .zip. So the simple command for that is just to type unzip. So I've just got a sample file here called game.zip, and if I type in here unzip game.zip as I'm in the correct directory, and it will unzip that file. That's the new name of it. Very long file, very basic, but took me a long time to figure that out. Because I just was confused with which function to use for which file extension, as I mentioned earlier. In addition to this, I also used Python to create a Python file to read text from a text file and then output it, or be able to transfer it to another file just in line with drawing, which I was talking about earlier, which is also something that I had some issues with, mainly on Vim, which I'll talk more about later. But I was able to remake a file which did that function very easily in Python. So if I just go cat and then stocks.txt, so here's a list of stocks that I've just made up, okay, and if I go vim remake.py, and essentially this file here that I've made, I'll just go through it line by line. So file equals open, it just reads the file, allows you to read from the file. Lines equals file.readline, so that essentially just takes as an input each individual line, or in fact even can take all of them. And then I've got for I in lines print I.strip, so that just takes the text of each line. It doesn't give you a new line in addition to it, so all of them come sequentially one after another. There aren't any gaps. And then you can see in the quote marks here I've got print file.read line, so I was going to do one line at a time, inside this for loop here, but I looked some things up online and found that this works a bit easier. Now in this particular file that I have, I'm just going to exit Vim here, and if I run this in Python, so Python 3 remake.py, and it outputs that. Now for this particular one, I only have 3 stocks, so it's very, very simple. However, if you have 8,000 stocks, then you can see why you would need programs to automate processes, make them easier for you. Earlier I was mentioning needing to put the quote marks before and after each file name so that they can be taken as a string. That's essentially what I was trying to do with the join, and then also with the read file, so being able to read. So let's say, for example, I have them with the quote marks around them, right? If you program, then you know with the quote marks around, that means it's a string, right? That's your text, right? So let's say you need a file that's gonna input all of that one line at a time, so that you know what you're going to use. So in context of the program we were making, the plan was for someone to make a front end interface, and they would need to have a text for each stock name as a drop down menu at the start of the page. And so that means that the person can type in their stock, see, oh, is it here? It's not. They can scroll through the thing, but there's 8,000 different stocks, so there's a way of going about it, but it's nice to just have a good interface, right? So you can search through, find everything you need very easily. And lastly, to summarize, I'm just going to go through some mistakes that I made, as well as some things that I did well over the weekend hackathon. So the first thing that comes to mind for me is lack of practice. I could have spent a lot more time practicing some of the things in Bash that I wanted to use for the hackathon. It was more of just a coding competition where you get together a team, make something interesting, work together, have some fun, learn. That mainly being it, which I think is absolutely fine. But I didn't know that. But on top of that, I didn't actually practice my skills enough. Now, I know it's tricky with me being a university student, having to balance the workload of my subjects as well as the workload of doing YouTube and trying to learn other skills to help me with my programming knowledge and skills. But if I had prepared more in advance, then I would have been a lot better going into it, and just had a better idea of what I was doing. So in terms of writing my code efficiently and effectively, I decided that I would use Vim as my IDE, which I know a lot of people within the Linux community promote and say is good. However, what I found is that as I was learning a new programming language, I was learning, I've used Python before, but I was learning it in a new way with tkinter, and so I had to learn that and then do it in Vim rather than a more feature, full type IDE, which had all these other things that can help you to spot mistakes in your code. So the thing about Vim is if you make a mistake, you have to run the file to find out that you've made the mistake, and it will show you then in your command line However, in other IDEs, you can just see where your mistake is right away, and it's just very easy. It can save you a bunch of time, save you running things, which I just really like about having other IDEs. But I do think the simplicity of Vim is still good. I still think it's nice that you have that, but it only works well if you fully know your system and you fully know what you're working with. So if I, for example, run this Python program that I have, again, remake.py, and let's say, for example, I decide I'm going to add in an extra bracket here. Let's say I'm just going to add in something that I don't need, right, just to mess this up, right, and here you see I've got an extra bracket. So if I just then decide to quit this, and let's say I decide I'm going to run it in Python, so run it with Python 3, and it tells me here's an error. Now, the interesting thing is Vim didn't tell me that I had an error. So if the program told me before, then I would need to run the file first to find out. Now, my file here only has like 10 to 20 lines of code or something like that. But if it were a much bigger file, then that could potentially be a lot of running and editing and repeating that cycle over and over and over again. So that's something that I think if you're someone who's learning something new, or you're having to edit something, it's very helpful to, even though yes, we can talk about bloatware and the file space and having gimmicky features that distract you, just having a little error check kind of feature just makes it helpful so that you don't waste as much time as you otherwise would if you didn't have that, which is just something that stood out for me. So I don't think Vim is bad. I think having all your different macro keys that allow you to navigate your files very efficiently, or if it's text files as well, it's still very helpful. I just think that if you're new to something, then Vim is an advanced kind of text editor. It's really more of a text editor than an IDE. Actually, there's just a lot of people choose to use it for programming. So I think that's something that I'll rethink or only use if I'm working on something that I know very well, in order to avoid issues with errors coming up. So just to fix this file up again, I'll open my file in Vim, add to insert, change the brackets, close and quit, and then if I run it Python 3, then as you can see here, it just outputs ant, bat, cat, just your made up words here, and you have the output you want. Very easily, still runs your file, still does what it needs you to do, but very minimalist, as they would say. So for me, another thing that I wished I'd gone into knowing more about was GitHub. So for our group project, we used GitHub in order to upload our work to and share our files. That's what the guys on the back end decided they were going to go and do. That's what they knew how to do. But just doing basic commands on GitHub in order to share work is something that I just wish that I had knew. This is just how it ended up, and I had to adapt and work with the team. So I kind of learned that on the spot, because they just showed me how. They just wrote some little things on a post-it note, showed me how to do it. But I wish that I'd known beforehand just a couple things. But if I can use this experience now, then I can figure out how to do.
And then, so basically, you are trying to use Django to make a framework for calculating the risk. We have implemented 3 methods for calculating the risk. and then we all plug into the single endpoint, which is called predictions.
So we've used tkinter to do that front end rather than doing like HTML and some JavaScript to interact with things. And that's it has a list, so there's lots of stocks, so we use NASDAQ. So we've got a list of about 8,000 different stocks. It will just read from the text file, check if what you tapped in is in that text file or the list, check if it's a real stock or not. Why we care about stocks? Because they just outline different things about the rest of the world, like for example inflation, which is currently going on at the moment.
So basically, we try to connect our front end with backend, but unfortunately we didn't implement it at all. So we just can, let's say we input the stock in here, how many shares we hold it. So basically when we click the button here, it will show up the stock we have, and then basically ideally we will output in here, like next photo, like this. So it will be the ideal output, but we cannot make it at the moment. So yeah, basically that's all. Thank you.